The construction site buzzed with the clatter of machinery and sharp orders barked over walkie-talkies. Standing center stage in an expensive tailored suit, 55-year-old Douglas Kane, white, square-jawed real estate tycoon, surveyed the project like a king among peasants. The workers paused as Elijah Brooks arrived. 43. Black, muscular build, calm intensity in his eyes. Wearing worn boots and a blue-collar jacket stained from years of labor. Elijah approached confidently, extending a respectful hand. Kane squinted at him, then laughed. "You're the contractor," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "I thought you were here to pick up scrap." A few workers chuckled uncomfortably. Elijah's hand dropped. "I've got your plans," he said evenly. The city signed off. Kane waved dismissively. "Don't waste my time with small man paperwork. My guys'll handle it. Just keep the coffee hot." Elijah said nothing, but his jaw clenched. The tension lingered like a held breath as Kane turned away, already forgotten. But Elijah wasn't one to stay forgotten for long. Elijah walked back toward his battered truck, the taste of humiliation thick in his throat. But this wasn't the first time someone like Kane tried to shrink him with arrogance. He opened the passenger door, where his daughter's crayon drawing of a building still clung to the dashboard. That sketch was her dream. It reminded him who he was doing this for. Elijah whispered to himself, "Keep building no matter what." Across the site, Kane was laughing with another suit, pointing toward Elijah's truck with a mocking grin. Elijah didn't look. He didn't have to. He had plans no one had even imagined yet, and he wasn't about to let a man in a silk tie stop him. His eyes locked onto the rolled-up blueprints on his seat, as if they were sacred. He placed a steady hand over them. "Let them laugh," he muttered. "They won't be laughing long." Later that morning, Kane strutted into the site trailer with two architects in tow, still smug from the earlier encounter. "Get me someone real," he barked. "Not some charity case in a hard hat." His assistant hesitated. "Sir, Elijah has the signed permits and engineering approval from the city." Kane scoffed. "So what? He can read a blueprint? Doesn't mean he should design one." Unbeknownst to him, Elijah stood outside the thin trailer wall, silently listening. He didn't flinch. Every insult was fuel now. He stepped away without a sound, flipping open his phone. Inside was a 3D model of his latest design, a revolutionary housing development built sustainably with modular, affordable materials. It wasn't just good. It was genius. He stared at it for a long second, then whispered, "Let's get to work." The sky had turned overcast by late afternoon, mirroring Elijah's mood. He stood alone at the edge of the lot, far from the mockery and politics. In his hand, he held the first draft of his blueprint, a symphony of innovation, space efficiency, and structural brilliance. He didn't just want to build buildings. He wanted to build futures. He studied every line, every angle, then closed his eyes and imagined the finished structure standing tall where the empty field lay now. The wind picked up. Paper rustled. In his mind, he saw it rise. People moving in. Children playing in the courtyard. Elderly neighbors on balconies smiling. His voice was steady as he said, "They won't see it coming." Back at home that night, Elijah sat at his dining table, blueprint pages spread like a battlefield before him. His young daughter climbed into his lap and pointed to a sketch he'd redrawn from her crayon version. "That's the one," she said. "The one with the sun on the roof." Elijah smiled, brushing her curls back. "Yeah, baby. That's the one." His wife, Maya, set a cup of tea beside him and kissed his temple. "You ready for this fight?" she asked. Elijah didn't answer right away. He glanced back at the marked-up plans, then at his family, the reason behind every line, every beam. "I was born ready," he said. The camera would linger on that final frame. Father, daughter, blueprint, future. Elijah parked outside a worn-down community center, his boots crunching on gravel as he approached the doors. Inside, he was greeted with warm nods and tired smiles. Elders, single parents, and youth gathered around folding tables, sharing food and conversation. This was where Elijah had grown up. He wasn't just building structures, he was building escape routes from poverty and hopelessness. Miss Loretta, a gray-haired woman with a cane, waved him over. "Still fighting those big shots?" she asked. Elijah chuckled. "Always." She nodded toward a young boy coloring beside her. "Just remember who's watching." Elijah crouched, watching the boy draw rooftops and trees. "I won't forget." The center buzzed with small joys, paper cups of punch, laughter, resilience. In a world that tried to erase people like him, this place kept his purpose burning. Later that evening, Elijah met with his former professor, Dr. Raymond Holt, a retired black architect who once broke barriers in a field that never welcomed him. They sat in a quiet cafe tucked into a side street, architectural sketches spread between coffee cups. Holt adjusted his glasses, studying Elijah's latest draft. This is a statement," he said slowly. Elijah watched his mentor's hands glide over the lines. "I need to make it real," he said. "Not just for the city, for us." Holt nodded. "Then you'll need allies, political ones, financial ones, and you'll need to sharpen every corner. Kane's world is brutal." Elijah exhaled. "Then I'll be sharper." Holt leaned forward. "Just don't lose the soul. These lines, they breathe." Outside, rain began to fall. Inside, 2 generations conspired to reshape the skyline. At home that night, Elijah couldn't sleep. The blueprints called to him like unfinished poetry. In the dim glow of a desk lamp, he ran his fingers across each line, visualizing where light would fall, where children would play, where the structure would breathe. He adjusted measurements, rearranged flow, reimagined aesthetics. This was art, not just architecture. He whispered the word, legacy, to himself. Across the room, his daughter lay curled under a blanket on the couch, her drawing from earlier pinned to the wall above her. Maya entered quietly, watching him from the doorway. "You're still building in your head?" she asked. He smiled, eyes still on the paper. "Always." Maya crossed the room, kissed his forehead and whispered, "Then build something they can't ignore." The next morning, Elijah met with a black-owned construction firm he had worked with on smaller projects. In a sunlit office overlooking the city's skyline, he pitched the vision, a sustainable housing complex that would redefine urban space for working-class families. The firm's founder, Marcus Lane, leaned back in his chair, impressed. "This isn't just good," he said. "It's disruptive." Elijah nodded. "But I need your team to help me make it undeniable." Lane stood and extended his hand. "Then, let's shake the foundation together." The handshake was firm, unspoken history passing between them. Brothers not just in business, but in battle. Through the window, cranes moved in the distance. A new future was already stirring. Outside City Hall, Elijah stood beneath towering columns, folder of blueprints tucked under one arm. He took a deep breath before climbing the marble steps. Inside, he navigated bureaucratic mazes, stiff faces, and patronizing tones. He waited, then waited more. At last, a junior city planner ushered him into a conference room. "This should be interesting," the planner said dryly, closing the door behind them. Elijah placed the documents on the table, calmly sliding them forward. "These aren't ideas," he said. "They're solutions." The planner flipped through, slowly stopping. Silence filled the room. Elijah waited, unwavering. In a system built to stall people like him, this was how you fought back. With clarity, brilliance, and something no one expected from you, greatness. Elijah returned to the job site days later to find chaos. Kane had already started laying foundation without consulting the approved plans. Concrete trucks roared, workers shouted, and rebar was set in the wrong grid pattern. Elijah approached the foreman. "Who authorized this?" The foreman shrugged. "Kane said to go ahead. You weren't needed." Elijah's chest tightened. This wasn't just ignorance, it was sabotage. He walked straight into the temporary command trailer, where Kane lounged with coffee in hand. "You're welcome," Kane smirked. "I got things moving. You're dragging." Elijah placed the city's stamped plans on the desk. "You're in violation of code. Section 18b3, structural misalignment." Kane laughed. "You really think anyone cares?" Elijah stared him down. "The city will, so will your investors." Kane's smile faltered. Elijah turned and walked out. No raised voice. Just facts, and pressure where it mattered. Back at his office, Kane slammed the stamped blueprints onto his glass desk. His senior project manager, a wiry man in his 40s named Brett, examined them with growing unease. "These plans are airtight," Brett admitted. "Code's solid, designs advanced, and the city's already signed off." Kane paced, jaw clenched. "I'm not handing over my build to a guy whose name no one knows." Brett hesitated. You don't need to like him, but this is the kind of work that gets awards." Kane froze. His eyes flicked to the plans. Slowly, something in his demeanor shifted, not respect, but the creeping sense of being outmatched. "Get me dirt," he said. "Background, reputation, anything. I want him gone before he gets momentum." Brett nodded reluctantly. In that moment, the game changed. No longer dismissal. Now, it was fear masked as strategy. The next day, Elijah arrived at a zoning committee meeting only to find his presentation slot suddenly canceled. "Clerical error," they said. "Come back next week." He knew better. A city clerk quietly slipped him a folded note as he left the building. "They're being leaned on. Don't stop." Elijah stood at the courthouse steps, facing the skyline. This was bigger than zoning. Kane was pulling strings behind closed doors. That meant Elijah was a threat. He smiled, not out of joy, but resolve. This was the system at work, trying to keep voices like his in the margins. But he had truth, vision, and momentum on his side. "You're scared," he whispered, not to himself, but to the unseen forces trying to freeze him out. "That's why you're scrambling." The war had gone from quiet to open. At a late-night dinner, Elijah sat with Marcus Lane and Dr. Holt again. The three of them gathered over takeout boxes and blueprints spread across a kitchen table. "They're blocking me from presenting," Elijah explained. Holt frowned. "Then go outside the channels. Use public pressure. Social press. Investors care more about perception than policy." Marcus added, "You let people see this design, see who you are, and Kane can't stop it. He doesn't know how to fight honesty." Elijah nodded slowly. "Then we show the world what he's trying to bury." They raised their glasses, tea, whiskey, soda. This was more than business now. This was a movement. One they were building from scratch. Brick by brick. Frame by frame. Soul by soul. The following morning, Elijah stood in front of a camera crew and livestream set up in a vacant lot, the future site of his project. Behind him, a large easel displayed the rendered 3D elevation of the housing development. A drone hovered overhead. "We were shut out of the room," Elijah said to the camera, "so we built our own." He spoke not just to officials or contractors, but to everyone who had ever been told to stay quiet, stay grateful, stay invisible. Within minutes, his live stream began trending. Local influencers shared it. Neighborhood groups rallied. Elijah's voice cracked near the end. "This design isn't for the rich. It's for the families no one builds for. That ends now." Behind him, children played in the dirt where someday their homes would rise. Kane watched the live stream from his office and said nothing. The live stream had ripple effects. Journalists began asking questions. Investors sent emails. Community members sent support. Kane, meanwhile, was cornered in a meeting with a city oversight board. "Why wasn't the approved design followed?" one commissioner asked, tapping the stamped plans. Kane's voice tightened. "There were misunderstandings in leadership." Another board member flipped a page. "These designs show cost efficiency, environmental compliance, and public appeal. So why was the contractor sidelined?" Kane didn't answer. He couldn't. In the hallway afterward, Brett pulled him aside. "The press is calling. Your silence isn't working anymore." Kane glared. "He's grandstanding." Brett replied, "No, he's building, and you're about to be standing in the rubble." Kane's jaw locked. For the first time, he wasn't ahead of the story, he was behind it. Later that night, Kane sat alone in his penthouse office, lights of the city flickering beyond glass walls. He opened his laptop to search Elijah's name. A headline caught his eye: "The son of the man who was denied the permit." Beneath it, a photo: Elijah as a boy, standing beside his late father, Benjamin Brooks, who had once proposed a similar housing plan that was buried by bureaucratic hands. The past resurfaced. Kane remembered now. He'd been fresh in the business then. Benjamin had fire, intelligence, and a vision the city wasn't ready to accept. That was the moment Elijah began building, long before Kane ever knew his name. Kane leaned back, guilt and fear battling in his chest. This wasn't just a new fight. It was a reckoning decades in the making. Across town, Elijah sat with his mother, the article open on her tablet. Tears glistened in her eyes as she tapped the photo. "Your father would have been proud," she whispered. Elijah's voice was soft. "I just wanted to finish what he started." She placed a trembling hand over his. "You're not finishing it. You are elevating it." The silence between them said everything. Legacy, pain, memory, all folded into that single image of 2 generations of builders. Outside, the neighborhood bustled with renewed energy. Murals of Elijah's blueprint began popping up. Local youth passed out flyers. Grassroots turned into movement. And in the stillness of that living room, Elijah realized this wasn't just his father's dream anymore. It was his own. And it was no longer buried, it was rising. Kane's power began to crack. One of his major investors pulled funding after public backlash. A local news anchor covered Elijah's designs in a glowing segment. Community leaders held rallies. Meanwhile, Elijah and Marcus finalized the model unit for the development, a small, beautiful structure placed temporarily on the lot. It drew crowds within hours. Children ran inside and out, families stood in awe, and photographers snapped shots. It wasn't theoretical anymore. It was real. One elder said, "This feels like home." That night, drone footage of the model home lit up social media. The structure shimmered under string lights and hope. Kane sat watching it unfold on a screen. He tried to look unimpressed, but his fingers drummed rapidly. The streets had spoken, and they weren't speaking his language anymore. The next morning, Kane arrived at the job site dressed sharply, his usual arrogance subdued. Workers parted quietly as he approached the now respected Elijah, who stood reviewing logistics beside a new city rep. Kane extended a hand. "Let's talk," he said. Elijah looked at the hand, then met his eyes. "About what?" Kane hesitated. "I underestimated you. I want in. On your terms." Elijah didn't move. "You had your chance to build with us. Now you'll watch us build without you." The silence was heavy. Finally, Elijah added, "This time, the foundation was laid by the people." Kane slowly lowered his hand. Around them, workers kept building, undisturbed. Progress moved forward, with or without him. And for the first time, Kane truly saw what power looked like when it came from the ground up. The city council called an emergency review session. The public outcry, media attention, and viral support had forced their hand. Elijah was invited to present the revised full proposal, this time in the main chamber. The room buzzed with tension as he stepped to the podium. Behind him, screens displayed sleek 3D renderings of the project. "This isn't just concrete and glass," Elijah began. "It's dignity, safety, and legacy." Council members leaned in. A few scribbled notes. Even Kane was in attendance, seated at the back in silence. Elijah detailed the design's affordability, sustainability, and long-term impact. This is what equitable housing looks like, built not over people, but with them. As he ended, applause rose, not polite, but powerful. One councilwoman said into her mic, "This proposal is revolutionary." Elijah stepped down, not triumphant, but grounded. He had fought for this platform, and earned it. Outside the council chambers, the crowd erupted. Supporters, reporters, families all cheering as Elijah exited into daylight. Maya rushed forward, wrapping her arms around him. "You did it," she whispered. He shook his head. "We're just getting started." Behind them, young volunteers handed out printed renderings to the public. A little girl clutched one like a treasure. Elijah knelt beside her. "You see this?" he said, pointing to the design. "One day you'll live here, or build one better." The girl nodded with wide eyes. Cameras clicked. Across the street, Kane watched from behind tinted car windows. For the first time, he wasn't in the frame. He was an outsider to the moment. A future he'd tried to block had already arrived, and it didn't have his name on it. 2 days later, a televised architectural forum featured Elijah alongside leading urban planners. The moderator introduced him, a name once dismissed, now leading the conversation. Elijah shared his philosophy. Architecture isn't about status. It's about purpose. It answers who we care about. He presented side-by-side comparisons of high-rise luxury condos and his inclusive community-based designs. The audience responded with nods, applause, even standing ovations. An older architect leaned over to another and whispered, "He's changing the blueprint, literally." Later, during Q&A, someone asked if he would work with developers like Kane again. Elijah replied calmly, "I'm open to anyone building forward. But I don't chase legacy. I build it." It wasn't just a mic drop. It was a manifesto. The tide had turned, and this time permanently. Back at the model site, the groundbreaking ceremony began. Marcus, Dr. Holt, Maya, and Elijah's daughter all stood proudly as the first shovel hit the ground. Community members filled the lot, clapping, laughing, crying. Music played. Food trucks lined the edge. It was more than ceremony. It was reclamation. Elijah addressed the crowd, mic in hand. "We were told we don't belong here. That we're too late. Too small. Too unqualified. Look around. We're here. And we're not leaving." The cheers were thunderous. As the golden shovel pierced earth again, a drone soared above, capturing the moment for generations to come. This wasn't a project anymore. It was a landmark, a place that said, "We built this. Together." That night, Elijah sat quietly on his porch, the sounds of celebration still faint in the distance. He cradled a framed photo of his father, Benjamin Brooks, hard hat on, smiling with pride from decades ago. Elijah whispered, "We made it, Pop." Maya joined him, resting her head on his shoulder. "And you changed the skyline," she said. Elijah shook his head. "I changed the ground beneath it." Their daughter ran outside barefoot, holding a flashlight, pretending it was a torch. "I'm gonna build something next," she shouted. Elijah laughed. "You already are." The camera slowly pulled back, the warm porch light glowing against the night sky. Legacy wasn't in the marble. It was in the moments. And Elijah had finally built something no one could tear down. Construction had begun in full. Foundations were laid with precision. Every nail, beam, and pipe told a story not of profit, but of people. Elijah moved between crews, clipboard in hand, stopping to explain small design tweaks or lift a heavy bag of cement himself. He wasn't just the architect, he was part of the labor. A teenager on site asked, "Aren't you supposed to just tell people what to do?" Elijah smiled. "Real builders don't just give orders, they carry them too." Laughter broke out. The site hummed with music, conversation, and collaboration. Workers weren't just employees, they were invested. What was once a patch of overlooked dirt was now becoming something sacred. It wasn't just a job site, it was a community under construction, and Elijah was the heartbeat of it. Kane sat across from his lawyer in a downtown office. The fallout had settled. 2 investors gone, a zoning fine, and his reputation bruised. You still have holdings, the lawyer said. But public trust? That's another story. Kane remained silent. On the table beside him was a brochure from Elijah's project. Someone had left it there intentionally. It showed vibrant families, eco-friendly units, lush courtyards. The future. Kane stared at the cover, unable to look away. They're calling it the Brooks Community, the lawyer added. Kane exhaled sharply, more in recognition than resentment. It's not personal anymore, the lawyer said. It's generational. Kane nodded slowly. He finally understood. Elijah hadn't just won the battle, he'd built something that would outlive both of them. Local schools began using Elijah's story in curriculum. Designing with Purpose featured his blueprint as an example of architecture as activism. In one classroom, a group of middle school students sat in a circle, studying the plans. He looks like us, one girl whispered. And he built this? A boy asked. Their teacher smiled. He didn't just build it, he changed how we think about building. Outside, a mural of Elijah and his father stretched across the school wall, showing 2 generations holding blueprints. The kids passed it every day on their way to class. Legacy had become more than a memory, it was a lesson. And each young mind now saw construction not as labor, but as leadership. Months passed. The first full structure of the Brooks community was complete. Families lined up with keys in hand. Elijah and Maya stood beside city officials as the ribbon was cut. Cameras flashed, but Elijah's eyes stayed on the people. Single moms holding toddlers, elders walking arm in arm, teenagers peeking through windows of their new bedrooms. One child, no more than 7, looked up and asked, "Did you build this for us?" Elijah knelt. "No," he said. "We built it together." The ribbon dropped. Cheers erupted. And with that, people stepped across thresholds that had once only existed in dreams. These were no longer renderings. They were homes. Real. Permanent. Protected. That evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Elijah sat atop the roof of the first finished unit. He looked out over the structures rising below, his design, now living and breathing. Maya climbed up beside him, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. They sat quietly for a while, taking in the view. "You built it," she said softly. Elijah shook his head. "No," he replied, voice steady. "We did. All of us." In the distance, porch lights flickered on, one by one, across the site like stars. Kids laughed, dogs barked, music played. Life had taken root. And somewhere, beyond the concrete and the rebar, Benjamin Brooks was smiling. His dream no longer buried, but alive, radiant, and rising skyward. Kane returned to the site alone. The Brooks community was now more than a build. It was a breathing ecosystem. Families waved to one another, kids played in courtyards, solar panels gleamed on every rooftop. He walked past a community sign etched in steel, designed by Elijah Brooks in honor of Benjamin Brooks. He paused. For once he wasn't recognized, nor did he expect to be. He stepped into the community center, glanced at the open design, the natural light, the harmony of purpose and function. It was undeniable. Kane ran a hand along the smooth wood of the reception desk, whispered almost to himself, "This is what it was always supposed to be." A woman looked up. "You here for a tour?" Kane shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "Just passing through." And for once, he meant it. Inside a classroom at the new community center, Elijah stood before a group of high school students holding blueprints of their own. "Every building starts with belief," he told them. "The belief that your ideas matter, even if the world says they don't." One student raised a hand. "What if nobody listens?" Elijah smiled. "Then you build loud enough that they can't ignore it." Laughter rippled through the room. Behind them, renderings from his original designs hung on the walls, now symbols of possibility. Elijah's daughter sat in the front row, her small hand raised. Can I design something with trees on the roof? Elijah knelt beside her. You can design a whole forest in the sky, baby. The classroom erupted in imagination. And in that room, the next generation of builders awakened. A news drone soared above the Brooks community, broadcasting live. Below, the fully completed first phase sprawled across several blocks: parks, schools, solar-lined roofs, rooftop gardens, public art. A reporter narrated, once dismissed by powerful voices, this project now stands as one of the most ambitious and inclusive housing efforts in the country. The drone zoomed in on a family moving into their unit, hugs, laughter, doors opening. The broadcast cut to a local news desk where the anchor concluded, proof that when design meets equity, communities don't just survive, they thrive. Elijah watched the segment from his phone, standing by a new entry gate that bore his father's name. He didn't smile. He just closed his eyes. Not in pride, but in peace. Later that evening, Elijah returned home. The porch light flickered on as Maya met him at the door, her arms around his waist. It's done, she whispered. He nodded. And just beginning. They stepped inside, where their daughter had created a small model out of cardboard and Legos, complete with trees on roofs and solar panels made of foil. Look, she beamed. It's the next one. Elijah knelt, examining it like it was a master plan. You'll need better materials, he said. But it's a start. Laughter filled the room. It wasn't a monument. It wasn't a headline. It was something better. A home filled with dreams, love, and blueprints yet to come. And that, Elijah knew, was the real foundation. The screen fades in on Elijah, standing at the edge of the completed community, just before sunrise. No crowds. No applause. Just him, the silence, and the skyline he helped reshape. The first rays of light catch the tops of the buildings, gilding every rooftop in gold. He exhales slowly, his breath visible in the morning chill. As he turns to leave, he stops, then looks back one last time. The camera pushes in slowly. His voice, calm and certain, narrates the closing words. They told me I didn't belong, that I wasn't qualified, that I'd never lead, so I built something they couldn't tear down. I built a future. Fade to black. The sound of birds. Then, silence.